Patrick Hoops from the Carlton Footy Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
James Walker here from the Brisbane Lions.
Jason Johannesson from the Western Bulldogs.
Luke Parker here from the Sydney Swans.
It's Roy Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Max Orr, Melbourne Football Club.
This is Matt Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. We are almost the first way through our multi-bye round, the first of a few. We'll talk about that soon. Round 10 is just about done. Who knows, perhaps as you're listening to this, it is kaput. Round 11 is on the doorstep, and there is a lot to talk about. To do it, as he has over the past couple of weeks, I got Kane on board. Hello, buddy. How are you?
Good, thank you, MJ. Yes, absolutely just a crazy time in fantasy, isn't it? I can't think of a time where we've had to be on our toes as much as now.
It pretty much means that from the moment that lockout lifts at the end of Friday evening, you've got around about 18 hours before your trades and the partial lockouts of all formats. They're all doing it differently, but they're all got a partial lockout where it opens up. So even as the Essendon and GWS game opens up, the one positive we will have is we will know the teams for Port Adelaide, Richmond, Brisbane and Bulldogs, because they are playing on the Saturday. Of course, thank goodness for Ken Hinkley, though, Kane. He tells us this is what we're doing well ahead of when teams get announced.
Yeah, and the great thing is for this week is that obviously there's some premium players, the Dan Houstons, the Travis Boakes, and obviously it would be a massive shock if one of them was out. But I think the one that a lot of coaches brought in last week and didn't have any expectation that he'd play again, he was just a basement price, was Boyd Woodcock. So to hear that he's going to get another game.
Yeah.
And the good thing about him is, let alone the basement price, is that with this condensed fixture, he's not the type of guy that needs a rest. You know what I mean? It's going to be the players, the more senior players. And looking at Port Adelaide, it's actually incredible, MJ, what they've done in the past few weeks. Sam Pepper, 41% time on ground.
Yeah. And
they still won against the Doggies. Ollie Wines, 51%. Travis Boak down in the low 70s over the last 2 weeks. They've managed their engine room
so well
while still winning games, which is phenomenal. And surprise, surprise, the guy who's come back into the side and seen his time on ground go through the roof, no one other than Tom Rockcliffe. And we know what he can do when he's on the field playing 65% time on ground. He was up into the high 80s last week, MJ. So not surprising that he had a massive game. He was phenomenal, tackling absolutely everything, which is just old school Rocky. But these are the type of moves that are going to work for a lot of players, but also against. And you flagged it a few weeks ago when we chatted that it's probably not going to be the game rest we're going to see for the good players.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's going to be the in-game rest, whether it's time on ground management or just a change of role.
And we've seen that across this past week and a bit. You use Boak as the illustration where he's spending a lot more time on the bench than normal. And then the in-game rest in terms of role readjustment, Patrick Dangerfield. I don't think he attended a centre bounce attendance all game. And so someone like a Lockie Fogarty, they're getting that opportunities. And for Geelong's benefit, they got the win on the weekend too against an inexperienced North Melbourne side who are definitely one of the bottom 6 teams of the year. So they've kind of done two things in that move, haven't they, Geelong? They've gone, we're going to rest our superstar Cat, and if for whatever reason in the game it gets late and it's on the line, we'll throw Danger back into the guts. While at the same time, we want to expose one of our young developing talents for the future to pick up some extra midfield time. So it's very clever how coaches are navigating this period of time. And as fantasy coaches, we need to readjust in different elements too.
Yeah, the thing that got me thinking, MJ, is that the players that have had the bye, the 4 teams that are coming off the bye this week, when I think of that and I think of Hawthorn, Carlton, West Coast and Fremantle, not only have they had a bye and they'll be available to play every game for the rest of the season, but they've had a bye in this condensed fixture block.
Yeah.
So we've just got round 13 revealed, and it's back to a normal week.
Yes.
So the likelihood that a Tom Mitchell will have to do what a Travis Boak's done to get through is far less likely, in my opinion. Those guys off a bye, they've had that rest, they've had that management, and now I'd have the expectation that these guys are going to be able to play out the rest of the season, in their full role. It's the teams that don't have a bye in this period, and we know that the Giants and the Swans have the round 11 bye, that have to really be cautious of the management. We're talking about teams playing, MJ, 4 games in under 16 days.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So it's not surprising that Dangerfield did spend so much time forward, or Travis Boak was off the ground for quite a bit, because they're the ones that are having to manage all of this. And obviously, like you said, they still want to win, and they did throw Dangerfield into the middle very late in that game just to make sure they sealed it away. So when I think about, trade targets, which is, the time of the year where we're really right into that, we already knew that, clearly having the bye already done is a massive advantage just by availability.
Yeah.
But I think now as well, their scoring potential is up there as high as anyone's, just because we're not as concerned that they're going to get rested in game. And it's just going to be a massive problem if we pick those players that don't have that bye known as yet.
No, it's true. If you haven't caught up with the news, round 13 did get announced Thursday afternoon. It is the Gold Coast Suns taking on the Blues, the Bulldogs versus the Demons, Port Adelaide at home against the Hawks, the Bombers and the Tigers, Dream Time in the Northern Territory, the Dockers and the Swans, Adelaide at home to the Cats, Brisbane taking on the Saints, West Coast Eagles at home to the Giants, and then wrapping up the round on Monday with the Magpies and the Kangaroos. If you're an AFL fantasy coach, with that round kicking off on the Friday, that means you will not have the rolling lockout, and you will not have what you've become accustomed to this year, a vice-captaincy loophole. For Dream Team and SuperCoach, everything continues on. Round 12, round 13, full rounds, best 22 on the field. And we want to talk about some upgrade targets in a moment, Kane, but it does mean we now have 10 teams over just a handful of rounds left to go. That probably means we're looking at another bunch of either 4 teams having rests and a 2, or a lot more smaller 2 chunk of teams from round 14 beyond, knowing we are going to have 18 rounds this year.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the first thing now that coaches have to factor in, is that there is an extra round of SuperCoach Dream Team AFL Fantasy to actually deal with, because these buys have been implemented. The initial talk when the AFL announced the buys would be coming in was that they did want to keep the last 2 rounds of the season buy free. Again, I have no doubt that if they feel the need to change that for whatever reason, whether it's getting into certain states, they will do that. But I think it is fair to say that they want to have it as normal as possible the last 2 rounds of the season.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about that, MJ, that leads to me that rounds 14, 15, and 16 are when those, will be two rounds of 4 teams on a bye, and then one other round of 2. So when we think about that, that's a lot of teams, and that's very, very late in the season. Even if your player has a bye in round 16,
man. That's the finals.
It's in finals. Like, that's where, if they're a really premium player, and we look at some of the guys that haven't had a bye yet, Lockie Neal, McRae. Like, there's some absolute top liners that haven't had the whole of Geelong.
Yeah.
So you're going to get to the point where it gets really hard now to want to trade these guys in, because you know that they're going to have a bye and later in the season, and especially if you're a league player, you don't want to have to be worrying about not having a premium player in a final. You're going to get to the point where you're going to have to start looking at sideways moves.
Yeah.
Because if you're talking about 3 games to go, MJ, and someone's going to play a maximum of 2 because they've got a round 16 bye,
you move them on.
You're going to have to move them on. So I feel like with it going later and later, that just takes that desire to trade those guys in, unless they're really screaming value. And obviously, the thing we'd love to know is, who are they paired with? Because we can't even assess our own team and see, oh, wow, round 14 might have, it might have St Kilda, Geelong, Bulldogs, and Collingwood.
Oh, my gosh.
For a lot of midfield,
I'm done.
That could be. Whereas conversely, MJ, it might be a round where they say, hey, it's just Gold Coast and Brisbane.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you think, well, I can easily cover a Lockie Neal that week, or I could easily cover a Hugh Greenwood. So this is what gets really, really tricky, and this is why I think we really have to start giving that extra consideration to guys off their bye. We spoke about it with Melbourne and Essendon a couple of weeks ago, and we said that they've still got to be elite players.
Yes.
And I think now that we have 6 teams, and after this week we'll have 8 teams that have cleared their bye.
Yep.
I think there's enough elite players in those pools across all lines that tip it in your favour to be picking them over the guys that have a mystery buy coming up that we don't know for. I think now's the point where we've got 8 rounds to go, MJ, once round 10 finishes. So really, if half of those are going to be buys, again, you just don't want to be trading into more issues, down the line, even if we do think we will get more trades.
Absolutely. Look, if you play AFL Fantasy, it's less of an issue in that format. They've already said for these buy rounds and anything future to come, they're going to award the seasonal average on the proviso that they play the round before their multi-buy. So if you're heading into that multi-buy round, much like you have this last round and the one upcoming, it's not going to affect you the way it does a Dream Team or a SuperCoach player, unless it's like the Michael Walters scenario where isn't named the week before their bye, therefore their average score doesn't count. So that's certainly something for us to factor in. But in Dream Team and SuperCoach, where it is the round 18, even this week, we're seeing some coaches in Dream Team go 13, 14, 1,500 and others going 1,600 plus. So in these best 18s of Dream Team and SuperCoach, whereas SuperCoach, it's anywhere from 1,900s, 2,000s, right up to 2,200s, we're going to see some drastic scoring variance in these multi-buy rounds with the best 18.
Oh, MJ, if you want to move up in the rankings, you love these multi-buy rounds.
Yeah.
And the hard thing is, and what usually happens is, obviously certain teams are better prepared for these ones. You know what I mean? For instance, there'll be teams this week that are on the rough end, and what I mean by that is they're a Tom Mitchell owner, they're a James Sicily owner, they're a Wingard, they're
Doherty,
a Brayshaw, they're
Cripps.
a Cripps, they're a Luke Ryan.
Yep.
So they're fielding a lot more rookie players.
And they'll have a bad score because of it in this week.
And they'll probably dip this week. Conversely, they might not be a Lloyd owner, a Haynes owner, a Kelly owner, a Parker owner, Cornelio next week. And obviously that's going to swing. And we, as we keep saying, we don't know what it's going to be in the future. But what really separates teams this round is how did the premium players you have go? Did you have Clayton Oliver with his 130 in DT, 200 plus? Because what we're seeing is, and a lot of coaches were disappointed, Tom Stewart was a massive trade-in this week. And he was okay in the Dream Team format. Mid-60s is okay for a defender.
Yep.
But unlike Tom Stewart, he used the ball horrifically by his standards. He was some 30% disposal efficiency down on his average. And as a result, he was a mid-60s scorer. MJ, there's some teams this week, and I think a lot are in this boat because a lot of people are fielding upwards of 21 players.
Yeah.
His score might not even be in their best 18, or if it is, it's only a few points better than the score they're dropping anyway.
Yeah, true.
Whereas another person who doesn't have a Tom Stewart, they might have a Jake Lloyd. They picked up 60 points alone
in one move
on that premium player. So I think you can't be distraught by having that. Obviously, in the long run, you brought Tom Stewart, who was at good value.
Yeah, and still
over
is.
The course of the season, he'll net some good scores, but it creates this massive volatility, and we already see it, sort of every week anyway. With one big premium has a good week, but more so in these best 18 rounds.
Yeah.
If you've got people that were already down on premiums, and the one they've got
doesn't
has a
perform,
disappointing week, and the person they're playing, they might already have 18 premiums and have barely any on a buy. You can get these absolutely wild swings in scoring, and I think that's what, for a lot of coaches, gets them quite excited because they can get that massive boost in the ranks. How well their team is prepared for the other ones that will come. And that's what we used to always say in the past, MJ, when it was a 3-week block. Don't look at your ranking really after the first buy, but what did you do from the start of the buy to the end? How much did you move? Because that's where the real strategy comes in. It's not just negotiating one, but it's actually negotiating, the collective of them all. And I think now, as I keep saying, with the talent we've got coming off the buys, and that's from both a top-end level and also a value level, I think there's a lot of coaches that are going to be wanting to be splashing a lot of cash when round 11 opens up.
Well, let's look at then some of those players because it's a lucky break for those that are premium down in terms of not that many premiums were missing for them because it was only a few weeks ago that we found out who was going to be on this chunk. And the advantage for those that are heavier on players with a buy round later, look, maybe they get disadvantaged later with the pairings, maybe not. But it's just a part of the luck of, coronavirus style football. But let's look at some of those teams and those players that are coming in and off the bye. There'll be an article up soon at coachespanel.tv with some of my thoughts on who are some players that are ripe for the picking for you. But if we were to look in the back line, across the formats, is there any players that you go, their value, now's the time to pick them up? Or is it only the top-end guys we should be looking for?
Well, I think there'll be a lot of people that will be interested in James Sicily, MJ, especially in the SuperCoach format if they don't have him. The hard thing for me with Sicily is at that price tag.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of coaches in Best 18, Sicily might be their prototype guy because his ceiling's as good as anyone in defence.
Sure.
And he is prone to a stinker every now and then. And maybe you think that you get lucky and that stinker comes in a Best 18 round and you don't get hurt while you would in a normal 22 on-field season. I would just struggle to pay that much for a guy who has shown in the past, volatility in his role. Clearly, opposition teams, I think, have to start putting some work into James Sicily as they did in the past. So I'd be really apprehensive paying upwards of 600K in SuperCoach, which is definitely his preferred format with his elite kicking and intercept marking.
Definitely.
Especially when you're talking, MJ, he's 50K more than Tom Mitchell.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about a guy that has been the player in that format, especially on the midfield line. So I probably wouldn't be able to go to Sicily in defence.
Yep.
Hearn's obviously one with the history that he has in that format. He's a great SuperCoach scorer. Again, even back home, he's had a couple good scores.
Yeah.
But I'd be very apprehensive to think that there's enough upside there. The one I'd be looking at would actually be waiting another week and getting Zach Williams off a bye. He's the type of guy to me that I feel like we've seen what he can do in SuperCoach. He's already had an indifferent start of the year, and clearly the body is always an issue, but I think a week off next week would do him some good. Luke Ryan's probably one that I think, for his price, you're probably getting about what you're paying for.
Yeah.
He had a slow start. The Fremantle defence has gelled really nicely. He's almost got a monopoly on the kick-outs. And again, from a SuperCoach point of view, he's actually a good defender. He actually spoils and does a lot of things that aren't rewarded in the Dream Team style of game. Again, if you're not a Sam Doherty owner, you'd have to be really, really interested, MJ, wouldn't you? Just knowing what his background is. I know there's some coaches that moved him on this week or, weren't happy with him, but I just feel like of the 4 teams that are off the bye, if you're not a Doherty owner, just the upside that we know he possesses would be the one that draws to me. But other than that, it's not a super appealing.
It's not the line, really. This is not really the week to go.
Not with these 4 teams.
No, it's not the line I'd be advocating for. And again, using Doherty as the example, you've already gone against him for 9 rounds anyway. Half of them have gone your way, half of them haven't. I'd just be going all in on not having Doherty because he is the most highly owned defender. If you don't have him right now, there's no benefit for you in doing that. He's not going that Lockie Neal style, Lockie Whitfield, where it's like, man, if you don't have him, it's really hard to make up ground and negate what that player is doing against you. I'd be just saying, if you don't have Doc now, don't worry about it. He's not destroyed you over the past 5 weeks now. Just back that move in. I think there's just no defenders that I'd really, really like off the bye round. I think Hearn's the closest that I'd be tempted to, but that there's just not enough evidence for me to go make that move with confidence of having him in your final on-field side.
Yeah, I agree. Again, the value's there, so it's hard to get really burnt because he is almost about as basement as he can sort of get. And you know that he's got at least a stretch at home. I do think they'll have to travel again West Coast just with the way things are shaping up and who they've played and just where everyone else is based. But he still will get a stretch at home. But he just hasn't had, even the kick-ins, he takes a lot of them, but it's not that same monopoly.
Yeah. And
I think the way West Coast playing, they don't have that same reliance on him out of defence. They've got a lot of guys that have improved. Liam Duggan, Brad Shepherd, these sort of guys, they have a lot of confidence in using the ball. So, I'd be trying to steer clear of that backline if I could. If you have to do a backline move, you're probably looking at a rookie, but I'm sure we'll touch on those later in the podcast.
A little bit later on. Let's head to the midfield. There's probably 2 really big standout value picks, but not just are they value players. I think they're genuine top liners that just haven't quite had the start, or at least the last month of footy that people owners would have liked. I'm referring to Tom Mitchell and Patrick Cripps. Both showed good signs in their last week before taking this round off. However, the month before that, they were both pretty quiet, and that's why they're around about 100-odd K cheaper, if not more in formats, than their original starting price.
Yeah, I think, MJ, both of these guys best. We know Tom Mitchell's best is legitimately up there with the best we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Patrick Cripps, in both formats, is a top 8 guy when he's on.
Yeah.
We spoke about in other podcasts. He went 20-odd games, averaging 115 plus in DT, albeit across the end of one season and the start of another. But that's an extended period of time with absolute monstrous scoring. Again, I think SuperCoach is still clearly his preferred format.
Yeah, I agree.
His ability to impact the game is phenomenal, and I think in that side for Carlton, he still is clearly that guy that can turn a game. The issue is there's not the same reliance as there was in the past to get him a ton of ball.
Yeah.
And he's still doing so much on the inside that he doesn't get those easy touches that we see the likes of Lachie Neale and Jack McRae, able to do late in the game to turn a solid score into a very good one.
Yeah.
So again, I think for both of them, it's SuperCoach is their preferred format where the value sort of is at its best.
Yes.
But again, the way Patrick Cripps is priced across all formats, offer buy, that can't do him anything poor. He takes a lot of physical contact. So to have a bit of a rest at the midway point of the season, and just knowing his potential and ability for a big score.
Yeah.
And again, he's probably one MJ that does benefit from the best 18. If you can knock out a few of those scores where he either gets tagged or he just has a quiet game, that might cover you enough to be buoyed by the 100 pluses that he can easily deliver in this year's format.
Yeah, and again, if we're talking about Patrick Cripps, Fremantle, West Coast and Gold Coast in the next 3, and from a pricing perspective, he's under 500,000. And so if you're a Sam Simpson or a Marlon Pickett owner, it's around about 200K to make that move. And certainly as someone, like you said, he's got the ceiling. It's the scoring format to kind of make that move to. And that fixture's not too bad, knowing as well he's playing every week unless injured or suspended.
Yeah, and the Blues are still in the mix. So I think that's another important factor. The thing is, MJ, there's still a lot of other guys, I think, in this line and off this bye. And to be honest, there'll be people interested in all 4 of the West Coast midfielders. I refer to Gass, Shuey, Kelly, and Gio.
Yeah.
Again, all of them, in their season are pushing for top 8. Gass, obviously, clearly in Dream Team over the years, has been a perennial top 8 guy.
Yep.
He's on the fringes in SuperCoach just with the outside nature of his game. He doesn't quite get the same, points across that format. But Tim Kelly and Luke Shuey in particular this year, we flagged it early. The way Tim Kelly started the year, his disposal was at an unsustainably low level.
Yeah, given his caliber.
It's not surprising that as that started to balance out, we've started to see some really big scores. And his connection, both of their connections actually, with Nick Natanui, is incredible. And we know how important this year clearances are.
Yes. And
especially getting those inside 50s. And the way the ball's going in and the way the West Coast forwards are converting, a lot of those are becoming goal assists as well. And that's why you're seeing, a Luke Shuey at times in the game doubling his Dream Team with SuperCoach. Just such is his cleanliness with the ball and influence on converting, disposals to goals. So I think those 4 guys, again, someone's going to be tempted by all of them just because they're actually all pretty good value for what their ability to score is.
I don't think, honestly, now format to format dependent, I don't think you can go wrong with either of the 4. If you've got a little bit more money, Gaff's probably the upper echelon of price, and that's because he's, up until the last 4 or 5 weeks, was flying. Like, I think he started the year in opening month in Dream Team and Fantasy, averaging over the ton, was over 120 in SuperCoach, and he's going about 80, 85, 75 in that 10-point range, depending on the format. So he's had the quieter last 4 to 5 weeks where the others have been a little bit stronger performing, but you can build a case that all of them are good trade-in targets. They've got that fixture at home. They've got one of the best ruckmen that is going to give them hit-outs to advantage opportunities in Nick Natanui. I don't think you can really go wrong with any of those. Yeah,
you have to have Gaff for the DT side of the game, AFL Fantasy. That's where he just really thrives. And it was a bit strange the last game against Geelong, he was oddly quiet.
Yeah.
And it was particularly strange because he was on the ground 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And it was very un-Gaff-like. But you'd have to think, MJ, knowing his durability,
Yep.
Being near impeccable,
Yeah.
and the way he plays the game, he does have a massive ceiling about him.
Yeah.
And he's a top 8 guy in a normal season,
Yeah,
let alone
I like him.
off a bye. So I think you can't go too far wrong because really he's going to be on the field for you every week.
Yep.
He's got a potential for a big score. And he's at a good price for what he can deliver. I think there's, in a DT format, he ticks all those boxes.
Well, and again, if you're an Adam Treloar owner, he's relatively unique due to him starting later in the year. Not because he's not a great scorer, we've shown that. But now that hamstring, Bucks in the press conference said he's awaiting scans, but likely 3 to 4 rounds of games. I actually don't mind that trade. It's probably not going to give you as much value for money in a Dream Team or AFL Fantasy format, but a Treloar over to a Gaff, I totally would get why someone would make that trade, let alone anything else.
Would you be interested in Gaff in a SuperCoach format, MJ? He's had a very strange sort of scoring start to the year. He started the season with 4 consecutive tons and was averaging 121. Then he ran into Ryan Clark, who did a good job keeping him to 83. Ben Keys kept him to 67. And then his last 3 weeks, he's gone 90, 130 against Collingwood, and then a 66 against Geelong, all 3 of those games at home. So he's averaging, not a super exciting 95 in his last 3, but clearly there's some value there just based on that lowly score against the Cats.
Yeah, well, I think you've got to put it into the price perspective too when you've got Shuey, Yo, and Cripps, just 3 of the names, all within a cheaper price point than him. And I'd feel definitely with Cripps, way more confident. Now, the ownership number's higher, but I feel way more confident that he's going to score higher. Now, again, you start bringing the Kellys in the mix, then now we're talking about adding another 50, 60,000 or a Mitchell, another 50, 60,000. But again, they're priced that there. I don't mind Gaff in SuperCoach, but I just see a Patrick Cripps at under 500,000. How can I choose a cheaper Patrick Cripps over an Andrew Gaff? Unless I'm already a Cripps owner, I just don't know if I can advocate for that to be the right move.
Yeah, I think that would be the scenario you'd have to be in, MJ, is that you're probably already a Cripps owner. You're most likely already a Tom Mitchell owner because, albeit 60K more expensive in that format, I have a lot of confidence that Tom Mitchell in 8 games
beats
can
Gaff.
average 120.
Yeah.
Whereas Gaff is really more that 110 to 115 type of guy, and I would just rather pay up that little bit more. Again, you've got a 66 in the rolling scores for another 2 weeks. So if you wanted to, Gaff's probably not going to go too far away from that 500K mark.
Break even of 103.
Yeah, and he's got a 130, which will about to roll out after that next week. So while he might go up a little bit the next week, depending how he plays against Hawthorn, maybe he's back around this price.
Yeah.
He's probably a guy that you could, wait on, because I don't think he's going to get too far away from it. I don't expect him to go 150 and be in that, 550 type of range. Whereas obviously a Patrick Cripps and a Tom Mitchell, with the way they performed, their price could get away from you quite quickly. I agree. I wouldn't be choosing him over that, but I think, like I said, in the Dream Team format, there's something in having a guy that is as durable as Gaff with that type of ceiling, and especially now that obviously Ryan Clark is a guy that's gone to him in the past and done a good job, but really, when Tim Kelly and Luke Shuey are up and going, even with that GWS matchup in round 13, and if Matt DeBoer was healthy, I think they'd be drawing the real hard attention.
Yeah, agree.
And Gaff just does his thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's, Duncan's still value, but again, knowing there is a buy to come. But he still certainly presents some value for you there. For it to move to the ruck line, look, honestly, here's my thoughts. If you don't have one of 3G in Goldie, Gawn, and now he's got some injury concern anyway, maybe we'll talk about that a bit later on, and Grundy, you might be okay for a week or two. We've seen that with English, Pitternet, Naismith, maybe even Draper now that he's rucked solo. So we've seen these hybrid guys or these value picks work for a week or two. But beyond that, it's just not worked out. Now, I don't mind if someone's gone down to Draper from a mid-price failed ruck and have then used that money elsewhere to top up. We talked about that on last week's episode. If it got you Dusty and Duncan last week, awesome, fantastic. But really, in the rucks, like Rowan Marshall's probably the closest for me, Kane, of anyone other than those three Gs. Like he's gone 95, 82, 82 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team lately, 160, 143 and 90 in SuperCoach. But even then, even with some big scores, those three big boys are so much further ahead in my mind.
Yeah, the one guy would be Nick Natanui, but
yeah.
as we know, it's no surprise that when the game was really tight with the Cats all the way throughout, Nick Nat played a little longer.
Yep.
And his score, and again, he's another SuperCoach, really exclusive sort of guy.
Yeah, it's true.
His SuperCoach score was massive, but in the past, against Collingwood, for instance, he played less than 60% time on ground because he won the game in the first half.
Yeah.
And then they shut him down. There is one other guy, MJ, in the midfield I think we do have to touch on because he's a massive name. Nat Fyfe.
Yeah. Why not?
Obviously, he's off a bye. I couldn't do it.
No.
Again, we always say with Nat Fyfe, you start him. He's a very hard guy to trade in, though, because the body will go.
We've seen it.
At least if you start with him, you've given him the most opportunity to bank your points.
Yeah.
And he did that again this year. Again, you're going to trade in a guy, albeit off a bye. We just know that if the body goes again, like now it's just another problem you've got to deal with. Like I know his scoring potential is huge, but at the same time, MJ, the forward minutes have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
And when he's been gone, Brayshaw's gone to another level. Sarong's gone to another level. Mundy's revitalised.
Chera.
Chera's looked good. And Sun has to come back into the team. They've already ruled him out for round 11, unfortunately, for those owners of Walters. But I don't think it's all Nat Fyfe anymore, MJ.
No. Well, it's like Carlton, isn't it? It's for so long it's been this one guy that has held a midfield together, and any chance of staying in a game has been on the shoulders of their superstar getting them there. But now, through time and development, others are taking the weight. And as a byproduct, we're seeing others impact the games. And the necessity of Fyfe to be the guy, similar with Cripps, isn't there as much. They'll still have big banging scores.
Absolutely.
But it's not as essential. So, yeah, I think Fyfe's value. I think he's real value. But again, like we said, we've seen him now miss twice this year through an injury. I feel like you're inviting pain upon you, knowing that, he'll still go down in price probably next week or two. I just couldn't do it knowing you're probably running out of trades. You might get lucky that he's healthy and or the formats award more trades as we get into a more multi-buy rounds. But to me, I just think you're inviting pain in your world. Why would you?
Yeah, it's a no for me. It's just one of those things that he's a great player if you think there's maybe a hamstring in there and you can cover him for 1 week because, in this format, this type of season, I do think that if he was playing in years past, he would be right up there with Lachie Neale.
Yeah.
Such is his influence on games. But you always have to know that you're not going to have him every week.
Yeah.
And I just think over an 8-week stretch with the other options we've got, it's just a no for me. But I think the forward line, MJ, has a lot of value that people can get right behind.
I think there is, but there's one that he hasn't had his buy yet. Definitely SuperCoach more than anything else. If you are not a Jai Simpkin owner in SuperCoach, even with a buy round coming, he's going to be under 400,000. He will basically be at the same price he was as a starting squad member. And if in just, again, purely SuperCoach, I think there's still value in the other formats, but purely SuperCoach, he was averaging 119 up until the end of round 6. And then a combination of injury, tag in Carlton's case, and then just not really finding his feet up until the back half of last round in round 10, where he started to get an impact the game from round 10 onwards. I think if you're not a Simpkin owner, even if you're trading him into the midfield via a Pickett, I just think the value is too good not to get, even though he's so highly owned.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think you can overthink this type of move.
In SuperCoach.
Again, it's just, even as you said, even if it is to be in the midfield temporarily, because there's guys like, Jake Arts that people want to milk for a bit more cash. But if you're getting a rookie off the field and you're bringing in a guy like Simpkin, like you mentioned, MJ, just under 120 points
for 6
through
weeks.
6 games.
Yeah.
And then, as you mentioned, it's very easy to explain away the
Why?
horror last 3 rounds he's had. Again, Adelaide game, he didn't show up when the points were to be won.
And they didn't need him.
And North Melbourne blew it out of the park.
Yeah.
And again, Jai used the ball horribly. In the first 6 weeks, if you watched him play, he barely wasted the ball at all, and it was contested. That's why he was such a good SuperCoach scorer.
Yeah.
Against Adelaide, I've seen it with Luke Parker this week, poor disposal. Taylor Adams could have almost had a 200 if he used the ball at the level he's used it throughout this year. He was down in the 30% range. And that's been a real thing that's impressed me with Adams, is he's cleaned it up so much, and he's become a really damaging type of player. So Simpkin, I just don't think you can overthink. Now, if you've got a completed forward line, MJ, that's where it becomes quite interesting to me.
Yeah.
But I still think we're talking about a guy that's 400K. If that's your M8 and you're swinging it around, I just don't think 120 points through 6 games. Do I think he'll go 120 points over the last 8 weeks? No.
But he doesn't have to, does he, at that price?
He doesn't have to at that price. If he's 100 to 105 in that format, at that value,
it's insane.
You could eat. This is the beautiful thing you can do, MJ. If you've got a forward, let's just say you've got a Hugh Greenwood, and they say he's got to buy around 15.
Exactly right.
It's very easy to trade Greenwood, swing Simpkin into the forward line,
and go
get your midfielder that you want. So I just think when there's value like this, and we saw it with Tom Stewart last week in defence, you almost have to make room for them. Like for me, in my team, I moved on Sicily. I already had Luke Ryan and Sam Doherty in defence.
Yeah.
Didn't work out the way I wanted. I would have loved a Tom Stewart, 100-plus score in SuperCoach.
Sure.
But I thought if I'm making 150, 160 grand to bring in Stewart, I thought he was that good a value. And I think Jai Simpkin is in the exact same boat, because I don't think the player you trade him to, if it's a premium, is going to be much better than what Simpkin is.
Yeah.
And you're probably making a fair bit of cash too.
Yeah, and look, to say someone's a have to is dangerous. No one's a have to, but it's that there is so much value there in SuperCoach. I don't think it's as close to a have to in Dream Team and AFL Fantasy. He's still a good option, still relatively cheap in contrast, but he hasn't had a ton all year in that format. He's had a couple of 90s. I think it's like 3 90s and a couple of 80s, but he's more an impact player than a high volume possession midfielder. He's not your 30 possession midfield, Neil, Treloar, McRae type. He's your impact midfielder. And so I think in Dream Team and SuperCoach, if you don't have him, Dream Team and Fantasy, and you don't have him, he's still got some value. But in SuperCoach, man, if you don't, just make that trade. In other forwards, who else do you like the look of? Again, if we want to focus just on guys coming off the bye, are there any forwards from Carlton? Sorry, I had to laugh at that. Fremantle, Hawthorn, or West Coast that you're like, these are the guys to go and get?
Well, to be fair to him, Jack Martin MJ is actually having a very sneaky good season across the format.
Yeah, that's true. All right, I take it back.
There'd be a lot of draft coaches that would be very happy with his output.
True.
I think the one that a lot of coaches would be interested in because of the best 18 to come is Chad Wingard.
Yep.
Like, his volatility is quite extraordinary. Like, he's already got 4 scores above 100 in SuperCoach. 2 of them are already 130 plus.
Yeah.
And again, he's got a 34 in there, a 60, a couple 70s. So if you get this right, you can maybe wear one of those poor scores in a best 18 round, and the upside is extraordinary. The thing I don't like as much is those big scores were coming when he was mainly a midfielder.
Yeah.
And I think now we've seen that midfield's really gone back to Mitchell, Warple, O'Meara, and then Shield. He gets a couple of opportunities in there, but really his scoring is quite contingent on goals. Like that's the really tricky part. And the other good thing is he does keep kicking them, but all those 3 big scores, he kicked 3 plus.
Yeah.
So it's one of those ones that, it's a bit tricky. Brayshaw would clearly be the one, MJ, that on form, it seems like he'd be a top 6 in both lines. Like he's done in both formats, I should say.
But can you do it now at
that's the
a
hard
peak
thing.
price as opposed to the value, knowing, we talk about Doherty, 15 minutes ago about, Doherty hasn't hurt you if you've gone against him in so much. That was the past 4 or 5 weeks. Brayshaw's had a really good month, struggled at the start. Do you just keep backing yourself in at this point without him and go and get that uniquely owned guys and kind of go, well, yeah, maybe I'll just keep going against the grain, and if Brayshaw has a bad one or something happens, then luck goes my way.
I think so, MJ. I couldn't be trading in Brayshaw if I didn't have Cripps, if I didn't have Tom Mitchell. At the value you're paying for with Brayshaw, and this is the thing, now we're just seeing Fife come back.
Yes.
And we know that the bulk of his scoring has been sensational, and he's reeled off 5 SuperCoach tons in a row.
Yeah, he's been brilliant.
He's been absolutely incredible. But what's that mix? Like you said, when it's the full complement again.
Yeah.
And we've got to throw Sarong into that mix.
Yes, he's been excellent.
Like, what do we actually think Brayshaw does on the run home? And that's the really hard part. Where he's priced at now is how well his last month has been.
Yeah.
His last month's been, absolutely unbelievable. But, I would struggle to fork out that type of cash when I haven't seen the full complement of midfield go together.
You're right, and that's across all the formats. Like you're in Dream Team, using Andrew Brayshaw. I know it's a different line, but using the illustration, it's 20,000 more in Dream Team to get Tom Mitchell over an Andrew Brayshaw. 20,000. It is 60,000 less to get Patrick Cripps into your SuperCoach side than it is to go and get an Andrew Brayshaw. So again, I know they're not the same positions. Even Simpkin, crazy value, even with a buy round at some stage going to come. He's been awesome, and if you've got him, brilliant. And a lot of coaches do, and understandably so. But I just don't think if you don't have him, you just keep backing yourself in. You're halfway through the year. You've copped the pain of the last month. There'll probably be another week with no Sonny Walters that he gets a lot more midfield time. But then it is going to be interesting when they get that full team back in. Fife, Walters, Sarong, Brayshaw, Mundy, Chera. Even Darcy Tucker's rolled through there pretty nicely. How they balance that, there won't be as much points around, I don't think. Yeah,
that's the one fortunate thing is that Tucker is out for the year.
Yeah.
So we won't actually see the full complement.
Yeah.
I think if you're a Brayshaw owner, you're absolutely ecstatic.
Yes.
But I think, I don't think people will be trading him in because, as we said, the value is not there anymore. You're really getting you're paying for what he's done in the past few weeks.
Yeah.
And as I said, with factors coming in that we haven't seen, like Fife's played 2 games with Brayshaw in that midfield role. One of them he played the first half as a mid, and then he went to sit in the forward pocket against the Saints, and they got the job done, and Brayshaw was a massive driving force in that. The other one we've seen him play was on the weekend when they pulled off one of the greatest wins this season, knocking off Collingwood.
Yeah.
And they all sort of scored, as a unit, and they smashed Collingwood. They plus 36 contested possessions, plus 15 clearances. Like Collingwood, that's their strength with that midfield and Grundy. So I think that was a phenomenal effort. Again, I agree, MJ. Even this is where I would work against the buy. If I can save 130k and bring in Simpkin,
do it.
I'll do that, and I'll worry about in the future managing. And again, we don't know who they're paired with, but outside of Goldstein, what other North player do you have?
Well, you don't, unless maybe a Hosey if you're looking for a cash cow to bring in. Honestly, if you're looking for a forward, again, knowing if you've got Simpkin, and you're looking for a forward, like one of the most informed forwards at the moment is Dustin Martin. He's like 30, 50, 60,000 cheaper depending on the formats than Brayshaw. And he's coming off a 90 and a 100 in Dream Team and AFL Fantasy, while in a SuperCoach, look, he just pumped out a 184 a couple of weeks back as well, and another ton. This is
what he does, MJ. Let's be honest. He's the type of guy, and it was the same last year. He started slowly. He obviously got that De Boer tag, and then he got a suspension.
Yeah.
And then guess what started to happen? He started building into the season.
Tigers do it every year.
And he was almost a must-have. So we've got form that this is when Dusty really hits his straps, and we spoke about it on the podcast last week. It was a real sliding doors moment for a lot of coaches on a lot of players. Dusty was one of them.
Yep.
Neil was one of them because that price was not going to hang at that threshold for very long. And now it's getting to the point where even a Dusty's getting away from you if you wait another week, especially with that, like you said in SuperCoach, that absolute monster 180-plus score affecting his price. Again, you get to the point again where he's up at 600K and you've probably got to go another direction because you're just banking on a loss.
Yeah. Well, 111 last week against Brisbane, 186, then coming up against Port Adelaide. And look, Port Adelaide have been restrictive, certainly to teams. But,
absolutely.
Who stops Dusty? Like, that's always been the problem over the past couple of years, isn't it? When Dusty decides, I'm going to take this game.
Yeah.
Good luck
and he's
to
kicking MJ. That's what separates him in that SuperCoach format, is that his impact, score involvements. He's as selfless a superstar as I've ever seen.
Yeah,
his ability to share the ball. How many times have you been a Dusty owner and he's going into an open goal and he handballs it off to a guy to kick his first goal? Like, he's just that type of guy that he makes everyone else better. Yeah. And that's where clearly he gets maximum reward in that format. MJ, I think the one guy we've alluded to that we really have to discuss, because I think this is another sliding doors type of moment where if you don't make a move this week, you're probably going to have to suck it up unless it becomes a long-term injury, is Max Gawn.
Yeah, nice.
I think, especially in the SuperCoach format, the value he is currently at, we're talking 720,000 he'll be after this week. He's going to drop around 50 grand from after the weekend's game against the Crows.
Yeah.
Again, he's got 2 scores now, one in the 80s and one in the low hundreds. If you wait one more week, he's going to be around the 600 mark. And the reason I bring this up is that, earlier in the week, Sam Edmund had a report that Max Gawn went in for a scan and was in some doubt.
Yes.
Gawn came out and said, I'll be fine. The reason I was getting the scan so long is because the machine wasn't working. And I think a lot of the community thought, this is just sort of just made up. It's, no real big deal. Funnily enough, once the game's over, Simon Goodwin's saying that it's a shoulder tear, and he's acknowledging it's a shoulder tear.
Yeah.
And we'd like some protection from the umpires. And I just think if we're going into a condensed fixture block, currently this guy is still incredible value.
Yes.
Like, what you can do with that, and again, depends how risk adverse you are.
Yep.
But if you've got a Grundy, a Darcy Cameron, and you've got Sam Draper, you could easily move Darcy Cameron into the ruck line, play Draper and Grundy, and obviously Darcy Cameron's great cover if anything happens to Grundy for a week.
Yeah.
And you're making 320K, MJ, going Gawn to Jai Simpkins.
Yeah, wow.
Like, and the reason I say this is that at the price he's currently at, it still holds enormous value. You wait another week or two and he goes at a low 100 again, which is fine. It's not going to kill your team.
No.
So we're talking about a year where cash is tricky. People are trading rookies and making 60 to 80 grand.
That's a good move, yeah.
And thinking that's a good move. You can make 140K and go to Todd Goldstein.
Yeah.
If you want to, and you mentioned him earlier, if you want to be really crazy and go to a Rowan Marshall, if you want to go absolutely mental, you can go to Oscar McInerney.
Yep.
And ride that sort of step ladder. I just feel like the value that Gawn has after his incredible start to the season is gigantic. And it still is for another week. After that, he starts getting to a point where you just back him in because it's not worth the trade, not because he might not be scoring huge, but you're really going to spend a trade to get, like-for-like value. At least if you move him this week, you create some value to play with. You can restructure. And I feel like, Gawn was sensational, absolutely ridiculous. Across all formats, he was phenomenal. I would argue that in itself was unsustainable.
Yes.
Like, that level of scoring was absolutely unsustainable. Now we've got unsustainable scoring paired with a genuine injury to a shoulder. And if you've watched Gawn this year, and this is what, in my mind, is the most alarming thing, his marking has gone to an absolute phenomenal level.
Yeah.
Every time Melbourne kick out from fullback, they go down the line to Max Gawn, and more often than not this year, he's taken these absolutely colossal contested marks.
Yeah.
So I just think if you're, and it won't suit all teams, MJ, because like we say, if you're doing a move like this, I want to see premiums coming in. I don't want you to be moving Gorn to someone like, let's say, Goldstein.
Yeah, without using that cash.
And then doing 2 downgrades.
No. It's got to be Gorn to a Goldie, and they play in the same game, so you'll know what you're doing. And both are going to drop a little bit this week. Gorn, according to Bryce Mitchell, again, shout out to him, follow him on Twitter, especially for super coaches. His break even was already over 200 this week current. It's going to be around about that 250 marker. So he's only going to be over 700,000 for one more week. He could drop as low as 600.
Goldie's basement, MJ.
Yeah.
Goldie had a poor... This is Goldie in Supercoach, which is just ridiculous. Before this week, his lowest score was a 69 in round 8.
Yeah.
He scored a low 100 against Geelong.
Yeah.
That's his second worst score
for the year.
He's got 9 out of 10 tons.
Yeah, he's huge. And you'll make 100 and something grand.
Yeah.
The only reason you're doing it is because you go, I'm going Gorn to Goldie if you're not going to one of those other value options, and I'm turning Pickett into Cripps. I'm turning Rankin into
and you're
a
thinking
Simpkin.
you're thinking, and to be fair, MJ, before that round, he's going after the round even, he's going at 125.
Yeah, which is fine.
And his value for that, at one point, after round 5, he was 696 grand, Todd Goldstein. He's now going to be in around the 580 mark.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a guy that doesn't have any injury concerns. He's just rock solid, durability-wise. He's got no competition.
Nope.
But if I'm making the move thinking, I'm not giving up any points in that straight swap with Goldie and Gorn. That's just how I'd be looking at it. I'm banking on his body. Gorn's struggling. Clearly, there's a buy factor in there as well that you'll have to consider.
Yep.
But at the same time, if I can use that cash, and I think, okay, I've got 5 to 10 points just having Goldie instead of Gorn, which I know is a massive call, and a lot of people disagree with that and think that Gorn will continue to outscore him by 20 points.
Sure.
And maybe he will. And that's obviously the huge risk with this thing.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, if that gets me a ticket to a Cripps, that's the type of stuff. And if you've got some cash in bank, you could be doing a Tom Mitchell in as well. Like, this thing can facilitate, multiple moves.
Yeah.
And hey, if Gorn needs one rest, and people are wanting to trade him in 2 weeks when he needs that rest,
you'll get him cheap.
Well, and also you've lost all the value.
Yeah.
So now you're trading an asset at 600k.
Not at 7. Yeah.
And not at 720. So again, it won't suit every team.
Nope.
And obviously there'll be some things that will come out, I'm sure, before that game gets played that may change this thinking.
Yep.
But if people are happy to do a 60k Sam Sturt to a, Harry Schonberg, is this the type of, even Butterick? And I look at Butterick and I think, his scoring's,
It's
not
not
sensational, but his job security is as impeccable as you can get.
Yeah.
So you're happy to make 100k, going Butterick to Toby Watson, but you're not happy to do, Max Gorn to Todd Goldstein. Like, I feel like it's these type of moves this year
that get you there.
And the good thing about doing that, as opposed to the other one, is you could trade a Butterick to a rookie that in a week's time isn't playing.
Yeah.
I know Butterick's playing.
Yeah, he's best 18.
And I know that Goldie's playing.
Yep.
So again, it won't be for everyone, but I think there'll be some coaches out there that look at this and go,
that's my trade.
This is my chance. And we haven't seen Draper play this round, MJ.
No.
And that's the one if that's for someone who really wants to take a risk.
Well, that's
if you want to take a massive swing and you want to move Draper to be your R2 on the field with the expectation that, and this is the funny thing though, MJ. If you're a Draper owner, all you're asking for him is that he plays round 12, 13.
Yep.
If he plays those 2 rounds, you probably don't care, because after that, you've got 3 bye rounds to contend with.
Yep.
By that point of the season, who knows what we're working with in the last 2 rounds?
It's all just guesswork.
If he's scoring in the 70s, which we know that these ruckmen can do in this scoring format, that might be the type of move that gives you a massive restructure and lets you complete nearly every other line outside of your ruck.
Well, that's right. And again, you've got to maximise that cash. Don't let it sit and stash on the bench.
It can't be sitting.
You've got to use this cash that week in game. Otherwise, there's just no point to be able to doing it. The time to stash at the bank was probably 2 weeks ago. entering into these bye rounds where it was like, okay, now I'm going to get aggressive. Now I'm going to move. Now I know that at that point in time, it didn't look like we knew what the rookies coming in would or wouldn't be. And even then, even though we've got a plethora of them right now, the security of most is uncertain. I want to talk about them in a second, but we just don't know. So, yeah, if you're doing a move down of a gone to anyone, you must maximize the cash in this upcoming round. Otherwise, you're just wasting it.
Yeah, and that's it, MJ. And again, I'll say it again, it's not for everyone.
Nope.
But there will be some coaches that think, I'm languishing in the 20,000s. I've got to do something to spark the team.
Yeah.
I've got to take a chance.
Yeah.
And obviously that is a massive swing. It's a massive restructure to your team.
Of course.
But at the same time, it's not a bad time to be shopping like we mentioned. We just went through all the guys that are incredible value. Incredible value. So, again, I wouldn't be super scared by it either because the best 18 will cover a lot of it. And the other thing I want to mention is I don't want people to be scared because they brought in a Tom Stewart this week and they didn't get a premium return. Because more times than not, when you do that upgrade, you will get a reward of points.
Yep.
I know this week a lot of coaches didn't get that reward. They might have traded an Isaac Rankin and to get a Tom Stewart in with some DPP.
Yep.
And they feel let down because they didn't get a return.
Sure.
I don't want you to just keep thinking, I'm just going to keep, having 500K in the bank. Again, I haven't seen a rookie as good as Scholl and Schonberg were. Yeah. And obviously Wicks has got a bite. I haven't seen a rookie that's good enough in my mind that I have to divert from doing an upgrade if I can.
Yeah, I agree. There's only one other player before I talk about cash cows that I want to throw out as a thought for coaches to consider. SuperCoach only would I advocate for this, by the way. Connor Rosie, he'll be under 300,000 again this week. Under 300,000, remembering in round 1 and round 2, he scored a 125 and a 145. Again, purely in SuperCoach, it's less than $100,000 to upgrade Sturt, who we know is missing for a couple more weeks, to Rosie. You're going to make money from Pickett to Connor Rosie. Even an Isaac Rankin, pretty much a sideways move. The only reason I like it is twofold. And again, I know he's got a bye coming up. In these best 18 weeks, you want guys certainly with some ceiling about them. Rosie as a forward is as good as many. What he's costing you is, let's be honest, bench coverage is what he really is for the rest of the year. So if he gets a 40, 50, 60, he's had 3 scores between 30 and 39 in SuperCoach this year. So I know he's given you some stinkers. But at under 300,000, you're just getting insurance on the bench at worst. While at best, where we know we have 4 more weeks of best 18, you're giving yourself a chance a guy could pop huge. What do you think?
I think it's very team specific again, MJ. It's one of those guys that the scenario I'd love to bring him in at.
Yeah. And
this is where it's tricky because you're right. The basement price is probably now.
Yeah.
Even hovering in the 60s, he's going to start going up again.
Yeah.
So at 282, that is, as I said, people brought him in, and this is what I know really hurts a lot of coaches.
Yeah.
That people brought him in at 471.
Yeah.
After he went that 125, 145. In hindsight, now you look at those 2 games.
Aberrations.
It was an off Gold Coast team.
Yeah.
And obviously the Crows, we know the situation they're in right now.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, envisage a scenario where I feel that's, something that would sort of help me. What I'd love is that, Rosie has like a round 14 bye.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm trading a player who's got a bye to a Connor Rosie. And all I'm asking him for is 4 weeks. And in that time, I hope that he pops.
Yeah.
Because he has his skill set. And that's why he went big in 1 and 2.
Yeah.
In SuperCoach, he can kick 5. He's that type of guy that can kick 5, contested marks, be clean. There's word of a bit of a foot injury that he's sort of carrying, which is a bit tricky. But MJ, you're right. He's dynamic enough, and we've seen it with the big forwards in the past. Tom Lynch around this time last year was a similar price, and people said, "Oh, why would you bother?"
Yeah.
But when you've got that type of ceiling, and we keep saying you've got 4 rounds where you covered with best 18.
Yep.
Clearly one of those 4, Rosie won't be available because he'll have his bye. But really, like you said, if that's going to give you cover for the rest of the year, I just think maybe a week or 2 once we have some clarity on when his bye is, might be the best type of move. But yeah, he's the type of guy that if he's my cover or I can loophole him in the last 3-4 rounds of the season, like, again, you don't score 120s and 140s if you're not a really good player.
I think so. That is for sure. Let's talk about cash cows before we wrap up this episode. And again, every format is going to have a different priority. If you don't have an assistant coach package, certainly encourage you to get them. They're great resources, especially for our friends over at Sports Tech. If you ever thought, now's definitely a great time to get that resource if you're one of those coaches there. Of course, all of them, though, provide value for coaches. However, at coachespanel.tv, Saturday afternoon before the games get underway, we'll give you all the negative break-evens for you to go and have a look and help you out through your side. But depending on the format you're in, different players probably have some relative value for you. I suppose one of the players that I'm alluding to there is Wicks from the Sydney Swans. If you're a AFL fantasy player, he's going to be around about that 200,000 price point. He's going to be value as a potential trade target. You might have done it with Watson last week as well, where in AFL fantasy, if they play the week before their bye, you get their average scores for the year. In Wicks's case, that's a 55. In AFL fantasy, just
the 70 in the old.
Bank it. Like, bank the 55. Stop going, is Simpson going to get me there this week or is he not? Will McInerney, imagine if you had Close on the foot in the midfield this week. Bank those points. That's why people traded in Watson last week, because it looks like he's got relative okay scoring security as well in there, but you bank the points when you can get them, when it's around the mark of what you're going to get. In DreamTeam and SuperCoach, you don't need him because you've got a chance to get him in 2 weeks' time if he's even named. Okay, let's remember the amount of injuries it is, but I was talking to some of our Patreons earlier today about which cash cows are the right ones to prioritize. I think there's a number of factors always when you look at cash cows. Certainly scoring, security in a side, but also how did they even get into the team in the first place? Like, you look at someone like a Wicks. How did he get into the side? Well, half their list is injured at the Swans. Like, they've upgraded him. So, yeah, he played all right, but how did he get in? Was he probably going to play outside of the condensed fixture and so much injury? Look, maybe probably not. Whereas, conversely, like a Lockie Hosey, why is he in the side? Curtis Taylor's out injured for a couple of weeks. So he's got a limited fixture of games you'd likely suspect before he might get worked out of the side. That one of the few teams we might be able to have some confidence with our cash cows is maybe the Crows. Is they have to get games into these kids. That they are so far off the pace in so many levels. They just need games into Schonberg. They need games into Scholl. And with Hamill out with a concussion mid-game, I don't see how they play him this week. Scholl holds that spot, even with McPherson and Brodie Smith coming back in. So, I don't know, who for you, and again, every format's different, and every team's different too. They might not need a cash cow downgrade in the back line or forward line. Who are the cows we should be targeting this week?
MJ, the one I want to touch on as well, quickly before we move off AF specifically, is we haven't seen O'Halloran play for the Giants either. So we could have a little watch on him, really good runner in the junior levels, and we know that the Giants are so deep that he's had to buy his time. Seems like to me with Green and De Boer out that he's probably, this is probably his chance unless he absolutely lights the world on fire. And clearly, if he does, everyone in AF will be all over to take whatever score he gets. Wicks was impressive, MJ. The tackling, the contested ball, and he was pretty clean. He kicked a goal, 9 disposals, so. Not massive numbers, but he actually at a NEFL level has shown good ball-winning abilities. I think, obviously, you're waiting. You're waiting in DT. You're waiting in SuperCoach. You want to see, what unfolds because, again, we're about to go into a lot of buys once he's had his buy soon enough. You don't want to be, having a guy that's not going to be around. Clearly, off his buy, Toby Watson is a guy that a lot of people will be looking at.
Yeah.
Nice to know. That a rookie won't have to miss again and he potentially could be available. again, I was impressed. His second game,
he was good.
I thought he stepped up a lot from his first, which is, a thing that obviously a lot of the coaches want to, see. How did you learn? How did you improve? And he did a really good job, I thought. And obviously, like I mentioned, it was a phenomenal win by the Dockers. But there's a lot of guys sort of on the fringes of that side, whether it's, fitness in Stephen Hill. They've obviously been decimated in their key posts, and Toby's a bit of a sort of a hybrid tall defender who's, pretty athletic. So how many weeks do you think you get him for? The good thing is he's, in SuperCoach, he's about 155K with a 73.
Yeah.
So, albeit 30-odd K more than Scholl, but you'd think that in the short term, his ability to make 100K might be a bit more than Scholl, just with that, those tall defenders. They take a couple of intercept marks and a couple of spoils. They can get themselves to 50.
Yep.
But it is a competitive side, down there in Freo. They've got a lot of guys that, we saw how long Blakely had to wait for his opportunity. And Longmuir was, really impressed. So I don't think job security is massive for Toby. I agree with what you said on Scholl. I think even with Brodie Smith coming back into the team and McPherson, I thought, obviously he barely got the ball after halftime. He was very quiet after halftime, but showing what he showed in the first quarter, like that impressed a lot of coaches. And I think especially with the way Adelaide's going, the most important thing now is selling hope.
Yes.
Selling that there is some guys on this list who have the ability to play well at AFL level, not just, be a number, but actually, he flashed. He flashed potential, his ball use, just his willingness to have a go, which unfortunately for a few of the Crows who are out of the team now, they didn't show that in that opportunity. Schonberg's interesting because obviously, Sloan's nearing a return. Brad Crouch isn't miles away. But I thought he equipped himself, pretty well. The interesting part as well, I think that helps Scholl in this example is with Scholl and Hamill, they had no problem moving Laird out of his all-Australian position into the on-ball position, to give Scholl and Hamill that responsibility in defence where they're better suited and say to them, the established player in Laird, you're the one who's going to have to try to find a new role.
Yeah.
So I do think that those guys, and I'd have to give it to Scholl over Schonberg, albeit I like the scoring potential of Schonberg, but he got a lot of the ball in the second half, and it just seems like to me that they want to show at the end of the season with Rory back in there, with Brad back in there. I think Keys has been one of the recruits of the year, especially for what the Crows paid for him. He's really impressed me both offensively and defensively. I think he's been a find. So I don't think it's as simple as Schonberg plays out the rest of the season. It's really tricky with Hamill, MJ. 2 concussions, and obviously when he got concussed, he was on, less than 5 points. So it gets really tricky to want to trade him out.
Yeah.
Do you try to pair him with a Scholl and hope that at least one of them plays every week? Again, D7 and D8, it's a bit of a precarious position, but I just feel like with where Hamill's at, it doesn't really, interest me in moving him on. And the thing as well is a lot of people probably have Trent Rivers too. So now all of a sudden, if you want Scholl, you're probably moving a Rivers back to the midfield, and all of a sudden your lines start feeling a little bit shaky.
Yeah.
But of the guys we've talked about so far, I feel like, Scholl's the guy that he showed me enough just on the eye test.
Yeah.
I'll definitely let him off that he didn't get much in the second half, but barely any Crows were there in the fourth quarter, so I can forgive a first-game player. And MJ, just showing the potential that he can score 40-plus SuperCoach points and 25-plus DT in a quarter.
Yeah.
Like, that's enough for me to think that if he puts it together for a little bit more, there's a 60-plus score there. Hosey, the Ben Brown injury would have to help, him in the short term. Curtis Taylor's still a while away, but again, are you really feeling, super confident that he's there to help you in the latter part of the season when you might need the coverage? And as we keep mentioning, there's a lot of teams that are carrying Deadwood, Kavara, Sturt,
Butler.
These guys, and now Darcy Cameron, if people swung him into the forward line to open up the Draper thing, the mobility for Draper in R3, now people aren't feeling super confident with their coverage, which is fine in a best 18 scenario, especially when it's, teams that aren't super popular. Like, the Giants and the Swans aren't really going to ruin you. But we go back to best 22, and your forward bench is Kavara, Sturt, Darcy Cameron.
Yeah, it's big.
All of a sudden, you've got to start making moves just to field 22 again. And that's why I mentioned earlier, I feel a lot more confident trading going to a Goldstein and making that cash than I do a Butterick for one of these guys, because at least I know Butterick's going to be there. And Close as well. We were hesitant on Close. We love the price and we love the DPP. But he's not a guy that I think would be there for the long haul. Again, the condensed fixture will help him. But, MJ, there's not many guys this week that I think you have to go and get. We've already heard from Ken that Woodcock will play.
Yep.
Again, are you trading in a guy that in 2 weeks' time isn't going to be there for you? That's something that's really tricky. So I don't think there's anyone you really have to work a trade around and say they've got to come in for me. If I had to put it in an order, I like Scholl in defence.
Yep.
Albeit it's probably a line we don't want to be trading our cash cows too. So
no,
that
maybe an egg,
tricky.
Lemese. Maybe an egg if you've got him.
I think an egg.
Or a Hamill.
Maybe people have a Dan Houston. They can swing
Yeah.
into the midfield, and maybe you start moving on the Simpsons, the Pickett's,
Yeah.
the Bennells, these type of guys. Even a McHenry, MJ, like at the price tag he is at, it's like Butterick. I don't want to move him on and make 80K because McHenry's playing in that team. He had a little rest after a bit of a knock, but he's going to be there. So I'd rather people get creative and cash out a Sicily or a Gawn and throw caution to the wind and just hope that the player they bring in can at least get close enough to that player they traded out and use the cash that way, because I'm just seeing a lot of people bringing in guys that in 3 weeks' time, we've got no one on the bench. So I think it's a really tricky time, but it would probably have to be Scholl, Schonberg, just because Adelaide, might think it's important just to get games into him.
Yep.
And then probably Watson would have to be up there as well, albeit a slightly higher price tag.
All right. There you go. I like some of your thoughts, man, and hopefully that's going to help you as we enter into round 11. Maybe you're watching this and it's already getting underway, and that's okay. It's condensed fixture. It is the festival of footy, and we are all navigating our way through it. Hopefully some of the thoughts and reflections you've heard on this episode have been able to help you with your fantasy footy side. Kane, appreciate your thoughts as always, mate.
No worries, MJ. Thank you.
We're going to keep dropping articles right during the round and podcasts as well at coachespanel.tv. A thank you to our Patreons for your ongoing support. There's plenty of conversations we'd love to have with you. If you want to join that Patreon army, you can jump in at coachespanel.tv. Good luck. I hope round 10 has been kind to you thus far and that round 11 is even nicer. Yet again, best 18 in Dream Team and Supercoach, while AFL Fantasy 22 players, and you're awarded the average of the teams off the bye and on that bye week. How's it going to go for you? Is your ranking going to be better at the end of round 11 than it was entering in? We'll chat to you about that very, very soon.